Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on our next installment of the long coffee break. Today we have John Burford with Nederman with us to talk about dust collection. Sometimes dust collection is something that we all get our head wrapped around and get a little crosswise on. And it's not that difficult, but we just don't see it all that much. So we thought we'd talk about it in a little bit of depth, just to kind of show you what Nederman has for us and how they can help solve these problems. John, thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours, sir.
Hey, Travis, thank you very much for having us. Long has become a great partner for Nederman. We're really looking forward to what this upcoming year has in store for us. So Dust Collection 101, this is going to be a really kind of a basic overview of dust collection. And there's three aspects, and it's always the W word. So why, where, and when. So let's start with the why. Why is primarily pollution control. Dust, organic dust, man-made dust, processed dust is basically considered a pollution. So it's really primary. We are doing dust collection for pollution control. Can be also considered as housekeeping or workplace safety. And lastly, not the word that everybody likes to hear, but OSHA guidelines. There can be a lot of hazards in not properly collecting dust and filtering it out. So that's something we take very serious at Nederman and look at. The next one's going to be where. Where do we need dust collection? Well, basically we need it everywhere, whether it's in a school, a lot of VOC programs coming back for welding and wood, manufacturing processes, everything from food processing, medical processing, manufacturing processing of automobile parts, tires, clay bricks. The list goes on and on. Anything that produces a dust, which you'd be surprised that products you wouldn't think would produce a dust are actually very hazardous dust. Then when do we need it? We actually need it right now. Air filtration is coming back to a forefront in North America. It's always been a forefront in Europe, but it's becoming front and center in North America now with worker safety and various issues of that nature. So we're going to cover two aspects of dust collection. We're going to cover the different filter types, being cartridge and baghouse. We'll start with the cartridge collector. In the dust collection world, Nederman is the only company that manufactures both a vertical, as you can see on the left, cartridge, our NCP unit, and a horizontal cartridge, as you can see on the right of the screen, or as a lot of people like to refer to that as a checkerboard. Now, both processes work the same. You're still collecting and using a cartridge filter for your process and your air cleaning. The difference is some particles lend themselves better to be in a vertical cartridge by comparison to a horizontal cartridge. For instance, weld smoke. It's a very light product. It usually doesn't have anything granular in it. Very well suited for a horizontal collector. We get into granular powders, clays, things of that nature, things that might have sharp edges, sand type processes. Then we actually get into a better application for a vertical cartridge. The reason being, and I'm going to show you something here in just a second, is strictly the cleaning process. So if you were to put off or process a binding dust, that is a flaked dust or something that's not granular, it's more of a flat surface, in the horizontal position, when the unit does its jet pulse cleaning, what you're actually going to do is you're not fully going to get the dust particles away from the top of the cartridge. As opposed to the vertical, you'll see in a demonstration here in the next slide, it will enable all of the dust to separate off the filters and drop to the bottom for discharge from the system. So let me go ahead and show you all that real quick. So this is a pulse jet application in our MCP. As you can see, the granular products coming in, when I start this project, you'll see the filters the particles get knocked down by a diffuser plate. So the heavies automatically go to the bottom and the fines are what starts into the process. So as you can see, the dust particles are coming into it through the dirty air ductwork. The larger particles are falling to the bottom. Now there's an indication that the filters have been, they're full, they're ready. So the differential pressure gauge will use a blast of air called pulse jet cleaning, and it will knock the fibrous dust or the dust collection off of the filters. They fall to the bottom. Now, if you can imagine, we put those in a horizontal situation, and some of this dust does not have the ability to fully leave the cartridge. You're basically causing it to bind off. So there's a process in an application for both the horizontal and the vertical. It's not a one size fits all. And the biggest thing you definitely do not want to do is do not put a fibrous dust such as wood in a cartridge collector. It's not the best approach. It's better suited for a baghouse. Speaking of baghouses, well, we're going to primarily talk about our two main baghouses in the center of the screen. But before we get there, I want to touch on our cyclones and want to touch on our high backs. So cyclones, a lot of y'all have seen them around the industry. You'll see them in heavy processing. That is where you're going to strip out the larger particles. So let's say wood processing. If it's at a rough sawmill where we may be collecting bark products, we may be collecting large wood chunks, things of that nature, a cyclone filter is going to be your best application because that's going to separate and let the heavies get out of the airstream faster. Then we also have our little NC cyclones. These are smaller units. You'll see them in a lot of secondary education applications for wood shops where they're teaching kids rough lumber processing, cutting 2x4s, cutting sheets of plywood, things of this nature. Now, on a completely separate side is our high vacs. High vacs are a different type of thing, but they still are dust collectors. They're just for extremely large and heavy particles most of the time. But let's get back to the core of the discussion. Our baghouse. Baghouses were actually the first dust collectors in the industry. Cartridges didn't come along until later on with manufacturing processes allowed it. Our NF series is a baghouse. It's a modular unit baghouse designed for wood and paper processing. Now, it's not limited to wood and paper. It is applied to certain types of grit, grains, dust, things of that nature. So there's a lot of applications. Nederman produces both cartridge and baghouses for combustible dust as well as non-combustible dust. We're a European-based company. We work to the ATEX standards. So everything we manufacture can either be non-ATEX or ATEX. ATEX is the European Fire Protection Agency, just like our NFPA. Our units are modular, so we can expand as needs to be as your project grows or however it may happen. And then right below that, we have what we call our S series. This is a 100% NFPA approved inside baghouse up to 5,000 CFM. There's some restrictions on how close it can be to a point of egress in a building and things of that nature. But these are excellent indoor units for modularity when you may have projects moving. But in the world of the baghouse, let me show you how the baghouse filters. So baghouses use what's called reverse air cleaning. So instead of a jet pulse, we have another method of cleaning. So let me start this presentation off for you. All right, so we have our dirty inlet module. We have our dust hopper. These are all common units, the filter modules, our explosive vents. Most importantly are our regeneration fans, and you'll see what these do in just a second. There's two types of filters. There's either a negative pressure where we're pulling the dirty air across the filters, or in certain applications, we will push the air over the filters, and that's positive. That's generally when we're dealing with particles in the airstream. It's just a different process. So as you can see here, the dust particles are entering the unit just like before. The large heavies are falling out first. The fines are staying in the airstream. What we do in this application with baghouses is we use what's called a regen fan. And as you can see by these illustrations, when that fan generates the force over these bags, It allows the bag to vibrate and drop out all of the fines that is collected. Now, we have a couple different methods. We generally use a chain conveyor system for our larger particles, coupled with a rotary airlock valve so that we can move the product. Nederman also manufactures our own line of CARS valves, which is a safety valve when we're dealing with anything that's combustible that prevents any explosion or issues that may happen in the dust collector from going back into the building. Basically, we trap it inside one facility or one area. When we go back to talking about the differences between cartridges and baghouses, for instance, cartridge, light dust, granular shaped dust, sand, think sand, it's very granular. Non-ferrous metal processing, so aluminum, brass, things of that, polishing, various stuff of that. And ironically enough, organic dust. We could be brick making, we could be barley processing, we could be animal food processing. Now, that's not to say that it can or can't be a combustible dust. It can be either or, because we can build the system the way it needs to be to process it. When we come here to the baghouse, though, what we're truly looking for is we want to be processing fibrous or wood dust, carbon, cast iron flakes, fertilizer, ferrous metal, foundry applications, sandblasting media, larger granular dust, things of that nature. So there's a time and a place for both of the dust collectors to come into play that work for whatever your application is.
Awesome, John. Thank you very much. Real quick, if you could, how often do we need to change those filters?
That's a very good question. Nederman sizes systems for at least 3-year filter life. If you have a system that is experiencing shorter than 3 years, it was not properly designed.
Perfect. And then one last thing, when we want to get into laying these systems out, how do we go about doing that? What kind of information do we need to get you, and how does that process work?
When the information we need to start with is our application. What are we looking at? Is it going to be a welding facility? Are we manufacturing a product? Is it food? Is it a wood processing cabinet building shop? That's where we start. The basic is, what are we doing? Then we just need to know two more things. One of them, is it an automatic process to where in a wood shop where it's constantly having something fed to it, or is it a manual process such as a school welding lab? Makes a little bit of a difference there. And then finally, the most important in dust collection period, are we dealing with a combustible dust or not? And if you don't know if you're going to be dealing with combustible dust, Nederman has experts on hand that can assist you 100% throughout the process.
Awesome. Thank you, John, very much. Next week, join us when Matt Bilsma is going to be talking about EC fan arrays and what's new with EC fan arrays with Q-Pack. Thank you all so much for taking the time today. We really, truly appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you next week. John, thank you so much. Really appreciate you, sir.
Thank you. And we appreciate everything Long has done for us.
Awesome. Have a good day, guys.